Africa has invested millions in prepayment, and we're hearing at this conference as well a lot about smart metering, smart grids, and the question is, how do you make maximum benefit of the investment you've already made, which is prepayment? And my topic will touch on that and link to the loss management aspect or revenue protection, revenue assurance aspect of this topic. So to set the scene, let's look at some of the challenges. According to the World Bank report, in sub-Saharan Africa, on average, 50% of electricity generated is not paid. Only 50% is paid for. And this is from generation right to end consumer. And this is a staggering figure if you think about it. You're only collecting half the money that you should be. Obviously, there's some lower tariffs between generation transmission, and then there's obviously technical losses between the networks. And I think a large percentage of the non-collection is actually lying in the last leg, if you want, in terms of reticulation and consumers. Nevertheless, that is quite a significant number. Half of what you're generating, you're not getting money for it. And I think the second part of the equation is the non-technical losses. Similar reports indicate as well that you're looking on average of losses around 30%. And if you think about it, if you have 30% losses on average, there's probably another 20% loss in other processes. And again, this is an average across sub-Saharan Africa. In some cases, it's better managed. You might find some utilities or customers whose losses are maybe 10%, 15% or lower. And you might find some customers whose losses are actually as high as 60%, 70%. Okay. So I think these two figures hope gives you a feel of what the challenge is in terms of revenue assurance, is what I call it. So if you look at those staggering figures I've just shown you, why doesn't everyone have a revenue assurance program? I mean, we see people talk about smart metering, and we've got proper billing systems. If those figures are true, why isn't there a revenue assurance program in every utility? So I think there's some real world challenges. In my experience, I think utilities have not necessarily devoted enough attention or resources to solve these problems. And for me, that technical losses number, be it from a revenue or energy loss perspective, for me, nobody short of the CFO is responsible for managing that number. There's a lot of technology constraints. I'll talk about this in a bit more detail in my presentation. But to solve some of these problems, it's not about the meter, it's not only about the software, it's about the communication devices, as we heard, it's about data, it's about integration, and it's about business processes that need to be working well in order to start dealing with this problem. And we heard in the previous presentation as well, data quality. I mean, you have all these plans to roll out AMR, etc. If your data quality is corrupt from your CRM systems, or your other billing systems, you get to feel and actually isn't a meter there, the customers move. So I think data quality across multiple systems is a tremendous issue, and I think in many cases it's underestimated in terms of the effort needed to look at this before you embark on big programs. I think one of the gentlemen in the crowd as well commented on this. You have multiple systems now, you have issues with data quality, integration between multiple systems, be it CRM, metering systems, customer care systems. It's essential to get the integration between systems right, so that your data, your critical data, to enable proper service delivery to customers, your data needs to be synchronized and up to date as far as possible. And I think lastly, I think we've succeeded to a large extent to promote prepayment in Africa, but we still need to overcome with proper marketing campaigns, an entrenched culture of non-payment from end consumers. And this is not a once-off thing. When you start a prepayment project or smart metering project, there's massive focus to sell, or you should be selling to the customer. Why are you doing this? What is it? What is the benefits for you? But I think sometimes we stop, things get cold. And there should be a consistent program that happens all the time to do that. And the flip side of the coin is, I think, for the municipalities and the utilities providing service, I mean, the onus on you as well is to make sure that you deliver a consistent service, because by not performing or delivering a service, it just reinforces the customer's negativity. and they tend to be more, for not paying. I'm not getting the service, why should I pay? So I think it's a two-sided approach on both sides of the fence. So having touched that, I think I'm just going to spend just quickly to look at the birth of prepayment. I think everybody in Africa is aware of this. But just to recap, I think traditionally we had the postpaid systems, and the way the process works is the customer consumes the electricity first, there's some meter reading process, there's some processing with your billing system, a bill is generated, and hopefully sometime after that you receive payments. And I say hopefully, that contributes to the large percentage I showed you in my first slide. And then if there's no payment and there's some process in place, you might have a disconnection, a reconnection process and policy in place to deal with this where customers are not paying. So that's a well-established method for many years. As we heard in the Swani presentation before, AMR, which is automatic meter reading, one of the drivers for automatic meter reading, this has been with us since the 1980s, it's not new, okay? One of the drivers for AMR was to shorten this meter read to bill process. So the quicker you can get your reading, the quicker you get the bill to the customer, hopefully the quicker you get paid. And that was one of the drivers for AMR. Let's talk about prepayment. And I'm convinced prepayment wasn't the brainchild of an engineer. I'm sure it was an accountant. Because somebody said, well, why don't we just flip this around? I want the money first. Show me the money. Then you can use the electricity. And by the way, I don't need staff to manage the disconnection, reconnection. Prepayment does it for you automatically. So I think that was the thinking behind prepayment. Irrespective of whether you have a prepayment or a postpaid or a smart meter system, you have your challenges in both revenue management and electricity theft. And throughout my presentation, you'll see these two little buckets. The dollar bucket is the money bucket. So you lose revenue in terms of money. And I think the focus of my presentation is people forget you lose kilowatt hours. That is electrons lost on the network. That actually translates to money. So I think prepayment, if you look at this picture, for rightly or wrongly, I think maybe it's the CFO's accountant, sorry guys, you were worried about the money, okay, which is important. But I think we need to look at both aspects. So my presentation will look at prepayment and how has that impacted and what has evolved to improve revenue assurance, both from a revenue management perspective and electricity theft perspective. So where do the losses occur? I think this is well known. If you look on the wires, as I call it, on the network, you have illegal network connections. Customers are bypassing either their meters, and obviously there's meter fraud. People tamper with meters. So I think these are well-known non-technical losses that happen on the network itself, or as I say, on the wires. There's obviously technical losses. From generation down to end consumers, you have losses in transformers, line losses. I think this is more well-known, and it can be better quantified. And obviously with smart grid initiatives, I think that's where some of the benefits of smart grid can come on the technical losses side, along the generation, transmission, distribution network. Well, let's look at the back office. I mean, if you look at prepayment, there's a lot of ICT infrastructure, and I think some of the losses that we've seen in the past, basic, software and IT governance and compliance. Do you have control of your software that's actually generating the tokens, etc.? So, who's got access to it? Can people in your organization or at the vending point generate free kilowatt-hour tokens? I mean, that's where you can lose money as well. Business processes. I mean, you've got a number of third-party vendors. People can go and buy in the township or a pick and pay store or a convenience store. How is that whole business process managed to ensure that there aren't loopholes for people to actually bypass the system and steal money? And then obviously the whole cash management itself. In the end, customers pay with cash or credit card, and especially where it's cash, how do you manage the cash in terms of a business process? And that's typically where some losses can occur. And then I think in the field again, I mean, you have IT infrastructure. So I'll talk a bit about this in the next slide, but you had security modules for prepayment. There's point of sale devices out there in the field. If these things are not secure, people can start bypassing and you get losses occurring because of those things being unsecure. Okay. So that's very high level in terms of where losses can occur.